No, I didn't.
Oh,
I
it's
don't
in the
see.
black box, an empty one.
Well, we've got an empty one. It's playing now. But I think you ought to sit here because I'm louder than you. We'll point it towards you.
I couldn't do it, you know, I knew I couldn't put those. I'm trying to tell myself not to do silly things.
Right, now you've got to tell me something of interest about your early life.
About my early life, not have a conversation with you?
Well, yeah, but to get the full impact of this, we should be talking about, you know, when you were young.
Well,
And
it isn't on now.
before the First War. Yes, it is. Listen.
Is it on now?
Yeah, do you want to have a listen?
Yes.
Hang on.
This is your right. Yes.
So,
Well, actually, all I remember, I'm not even sure if my father came over. I know my grandmother came over, and my father was 32 before he got married, because he had to keep his mother, and couldn't keep his mother and a wife. And
did you ever meet your grandmother? Did you ever meet your grandmother?
Never. She died before I arrived at all.
And your grandfather? He died as well.
And my grandfather, I think, died in Ireland, as far as I remember. Gerald knew all these things and put it all down, but he's not here anymore. I remember, I know they were married my mother was entirely English. She was 18 and she was an only child, and she lived with her uncle and 2 cousins until she grew up.
And what happened to her parents?
I met her. Her mother died when she was either quite young or soon after she was born. But I met her father once when he came down to Woodford, and you have to remember that when we were living in Woodford, the first motor car that came through the village brought the whole village out to have a look at it. So you can imagine how far.
And when you were living in Woodford, was your father still?
Oh yes, oh yes, of course.
And he used to work in London every day?
We were living in Woodford from the time, I suppose, I was probably about 7 years old, and until I was 12 when he died. And is it still going on? Because otherwise, you see, I have to hurry. I feel I have to hurry. And he didn't die in Woodford. He died in Southampton, because after he was ill, when he was first ill, we had some lovely friends. My youngest sister, Josephine, hadn't been born. She was born about a month or 2 after my father died. So when he first got ill, and I forget how long he was ill before he died, I was 12, I think, and I was 12 and 6. I think he must have been ill for 6 years. But
What TB was it? What was it, TB?
TB. We had a marvellous doctor who looked after him and us when we were young. And when he was first ill, all our friends gathered round, and the Franciscans had a church in Woodford, and they were very fond of my mother and father because, I don't know why, but they just were. And we seemed favourites, and we went to the convent school. And when we were ill, the old Duchess of Newcastle, who was a convert to the Catholic Church, and had a house next to the Franciscan Church. I'm not sure whether she built the Franciscan Church or not, but she had a house in a lovely garden where we used to walk round in those days during Corpus Christi. We went up in our white dresses and so on. And when we were ill, she said to my mother, "Send the children over to me and I'll get somebody to look after them." And all of them went except me, who stayed with my mother to help my mother while my father was ill. I don't know how long that went on.
But when your mum married your father, your mum was a non-Catholic.
Yes.
And was her father angry?
No, I don't think he came into it at all.
But you don't remember your grandfather very well, you see.
I only saw him once, when he came down, when we were living in Woodford. And he came down one day, and that's the only time I ever saw him, because I think my mother's mother died when she was very young. And as I say, she was brought up with an uncle. And my father married again and had 3 daughters. And so, and my mother was then married, so the family never saw each other. You must remember.
What was your mother's maiden name?
Smith.
Smith?
Smith.
Bacon Smith.
Acted Smith, A-P-T-E-D, Acted Smith. But I think Acted was the mother's name.
It was a double barrel?
I don't think so. No, I think my mother used to like to remember her mother's name, I think, was Acted, and her father's name was Smith. And so they saw nothing of one another at all.
And do you remember your great uncle? The man that raised your mother?
Never knew anything whatever about him.
You don't know what he did?
No, I
Don't
didn't.
know.
Solicitor, I think.
Can't remember his wife?
I don't know I suppose he had a wife. You see, you've got to remember, in those days, people didn't move about as we do now. There wasn't very much money to begin with. And there were no cars, so people travelled laboriously by train, and it was to go any journey at all, it was quite an adventure.
But surely your mother was brought up with her uncle, and he had some children. He must have been like brother and sister. Can you remember them?
His children were two children, my mother's cousins.
Can you remember them?
I never even met them.
Really?
You've got to think this all went on before my mother was married, and I didn't arrive until after she was married, naturally.
But I mean, I thought if they'd grown up together, they would always be popping down to see their favourite cousin.
Nobody popped down anywhere in those days. If they had no money and there was no cars.
No popping.
And your mother was busy having children and rearing them, and your father was busy going backwards and forwards to London, to his job in Basinghall Street, where he was...
How far is Woodford from London?
About, I don't know, I suppose about 20 miles. You could find that out.
Do you remember living in Clapham?
No. The Clapham episode only lasted, I think, for about a year. because I was born in Chelsea. And when I imagine when my sister Kathleen was on the way, they moved to Clapham. And when my brother Bernard was on the way, they moved to Woodford. And from Woodford, then my father died there. Oh, I'm getting exhausted. Can you turn it off for a minute?
Yeah. Do you know how? Press the stop button.
Which one?
It's to the left of the red button. Right. Now, you once told me you could remember somebody coming back from the Boer War. Do you remember that?
Well, I imagine I do. You've got to remember the time.
Well, the Boer War was about 1901, wasn't it?
Yes.
And you were born in
93.
So you're about 8.
You see, with how many years in between, over 80 years, I can't even remember what happened yesterday.
Do you remember?
I can imagine that you're absolutely right to say I remembered somebody from the Boer War, but it doesn't bring anybody to my mind or any situation to my mind. So I could say I don't remember, but I'm sure I did.
Do you remember Queen Victoria dying?
No.
When did she die? 1982?
Well, how old was I then?
8. I can't remember when I was 8.
You see, I had my sister Kay said she could remember everything from the time she was 2. Well, I think I must have been born with a poor memory, because I literally do not remember things which I should remember.
Do you remember the outbreak of World War I?
Oh yes, I do, because World War One, I think
you were about 20.
I think I just got my first job.
In Boots?
In Boots, which is the only job I had. Either that or I was still studying and going backwards and forwards from the convent in Carlisle Place, where I was staying, to the college in Southwark Bridge Road, where I did my studies.
Do you remember any young men, friends of yours, going off to the war?
The first young man I ever remember was Gerald Sam, who was in the same dispensary as I was before I was a qualified chemist, and had to get all my medicines checked, and whom I saw a lot of, and might have married, but for some reason I didn't, and I can never tell the reason why, because he was very nice.
He didn't go off to the war?
What?
He didn't go off to the war?
That was after the war, surely.
Well, when the war broke out, which was 1913, you were about 20. So, I mean, some of the young men...
13 and 9.
Well, slightly older than 20.
22.
Yes.
I think I was 23 before I got my first job, but
you must have remembered must have been some of the young men in the village.
I wasn't in a village, I was in the convent then.
So when did you move from the village to the convent? When did you move from the village to the convent?
What age was I, do you mean?
Yeah. Because you went to a village school until you were about 16, was that?
Not a village school, a convent school, dear. Village school in those days was a poor school.
Right, so...
A convent school was not a poor school.
So when did you first
go to the school? When
did you first go to the convent school?
To first leave?
When did you first go? What age were you? What age were you when you went to the convent?
Well, I suppose about 5, 6, when I first went there.
And
Yes.
that was in the village then?
Hmm?
That was in the village?
That was in
Woodford?
Woodford.
Yes. And so how long, and then you
And I was
studied
there
there
until I was 18.
Right. And then you went
Because in those days they used to have what they called pupil teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So that people who might be going on for teaching used to, I suppose, teach the young children. Anyway, they called them pupil teachers.
And you were a pupil teacher?
Pupil teacher.
Right. And then you went to college in London?
In London, yeah.
What was the college called?
Oh, I can't remember, darling. I just told you. It was in Southwark Bridge Road, if you could find out what the name of that was. It wasn't any big college.
It was just...
It was a college for pharmacy only.
Yeah.
You see, there was the college, Royal... You see, I don't remember names and things like that. You'll see, in the album of the archives, I've got a copy of my qualification as a pharmacist.
And that will tell me what college it was.
And, well, yes, but it won't, because I didn't study at the main college. I studied at another college, which was in Southwark Bridge Road, and taught people
For pharmacy?
prepare people for the...
Was it mainly girls in that college? Or the boys and girls?
As far as I can remember, it was all girls.
What a pity.
Hmm?
What a pity.
Well, the boys didn't interest me at that time. I was rather student, and I wanted to qualify, and I didn't qualify until I should think my middle 20s. But anyway, my qualification will tell you the date of that. I'm not going to do any more today.
Would you like this button?